not far from that little town of Bethlehem. These days, you can find more and more Israeli settlements dotting the West Bank of the River Jordan. They've grown to become one of the most complex and controversial of the many issues dividing the troubled Middle East. Seth Doane surveys both sides of this great divide.
What brought you here?
We wanted more space and we wanted more of a community feel.
But West Virginia native Rachel Braslavi faces bigger questions than she might with a typical home purchase.
Do you see your family, settlers, as impediments to peace?
No, I don't. I really don't. I feel that we have a right to be here, and I feel that the Palestinians have a right to be here.
On this land?
I mean, not this house, but I mean, in the area.
Their community is the Israeli settlement of Karnei Shomron. It's located inside the occupied West Bank.
Yes, that's the security road and the security fence.
This settlement, like hundreds of others, is carved into Palestinian land. The border separating the West Bank from Israel is called the Green Line. It was drawn as part of an armistice agreement following the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which was sparked when the modern state of Israel was formed. But then after Israel's stunning military success in the Six-Day War of 1967, Israel took more land, occupying the Palestinian territories, and Israeli citizens began building settlements.
In Karnei Shomron near Nablus, new apartments are being built to accommodate what the government hopes will be the thousands of new settlers who move here before June. Every settlement built now will make it a little harder for any Israeli government to withdraw from the West Bank in the future.
Today, upwards of 700,000 Israelis live in these communities, which the UN calls illegal. They're scattered inside the West Bank and East Jerusalem. About 15% of settlers are Americans.
Do you see this as living on Palestinian land?
No, I don't. I think that some of the first places that Jews arrived to back in biblical times were in Judea and Samaria. So to me, this is part of our indigenous right to be here.
How much of your decision to move here to a settlement was cost of living versus ideology?
I came from America when I was in my 20s to live in Israel, and I kind of thought of that move as like my contribution to the Jewish people in our homeland. It didn't matter where I lived in Israel. And my husband grew up here and he saw it differently. He really thought to contribute in a meaningful way, it was moving across the Green Line and establishing like facts on the ground.
Let me just stop you on facts on the ground. What do you mean by that?
Just strengthening the existing Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria so that...
In the West Bank?
Yes.
The settler population has grown more than 200% since 2000. The Israeli government encourages these moves, paying for the military to guard them and funding public services like buses and schools.
We can take a little tour?
Sure.
Neighbor Judith Segaloff took us around Karnei Shomron.
Do you have friends or family who don't agree with you living in a settlement?
For sure. Some of them won't come visit. Here's our sushi shop.
She moved here 7 years ago from Detroit. She was able to afford a bigger house here than she would have on the other side of the Green Line.
Across the street is our mall. We've got an ice cream shop.
Just up the road, Segaloff says she's excited by plans to expand a settlement on this hilltop. She believes Israeli presence offers security.
But it's also a contested place, a place considered an occupied territory.
By some.
By the international community.
Well, they're going to have to get over it. You cannot live among people who want to kill you, and they're just going to have to move over and let us in.
But not far away on the other side of checkpoints and a security barrier, we met Palestinian Sahar Eid, who lives in the West Bank village where his great-grandfather was born.
The settlers there told us historically, biblically, that is their land.
We have documents that prove we own this land, which we farmed since forever. Ask the settlers where they are from, he said. He and his wife Tamador, a high school science teacher, invited us to tea. They say they're most concerned about rising violence from Israeli settlers, emboldened by Benjamin Netanyahu's increasingly right-wing government. Since October 7th last year, the UN figures there have been more than 1,400 attacks by extremist settlers against Palestinians or their property.
My father, he's born here.
The Eids are also frustrated that the fence and checkpoints around a settlement have cut them off from their own olive trees.
He stole my land. He stole my olives. He stole everything. He stole our free.
Stole your freedom.
Freedom.
Is there any space for introspection here? Do you ever think maybe we aren't the best partners to try to find a path toward peace? We believe that if there was a Palestinian state without settlements, there would be wide support for peace, he told us. The differences on this side of the security barrier are stark. Incomes are a fraction of those in Israel, and Israel controls the water and much of the tax revenue. You said you would welcome an Israeli who lives in Tel Aviv in your house?
Most welcome.
But a settler, no?
No, because he's a thief.
James Carville coined the phrase, it's the economy stupid. In Israel-Palestine, it's the settlement stupid.
Asaf Sharon is a professor of political and legal philosophy at Tel Aviv University. We've spoken with settlers who say, I didn't take anyone's land. No one was living here before me.
Well, of course, it wasn't done individually. Occupying a land doesn't mean you have a house on it. It can be grazing land, it can be land reserves for future building, and it can be just the area that is reserved for self-determination of a people.
Settlers make a security argument that Israel is safer with the settlements.
The security argument is completely bogus. The settlements are not a security asset, they are a security burden, because defending, protecting scores of civilians deep in densely populated Palestinian territory is one hell of a burden for the military. Number two, the best way to ensure Israel's security is to have partnership with a state or a state-like entity that has an interest in preventing precisely this kind of hostile activity.
We have ideologues on both sides of this equation that are determined to thwart any accommodation.
David Makovsky is a fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. In 2013, he was part of the team trying to negotiate a peace deal. That failed proposal and two others would have seen Palestinians keep about 95% of the West Bank. But today, with the increasing number of settlements, these blue dots, some far from the green line, it may be even more complicated to determine borders in a two-state solution.
Until Trump, all of the U.S. peace approaches were similar.
What changed under Trump?
Under Trump, working with Prime Minister Netanyahu, he doesn't want to pick and choose which settlements make it and which don't. So the Prime Minister convinced the President, said every single settlement is called Israel. Now, that creates an impossible situation of Swiss cheese. Any Palestinian entity is now going to be dotted with settlements.
Now settlers may have another ally with sway in President-elect Donald Trump's nominee to be the next ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. He said he's open to annexing parts of the West Bank. But there is historical precedent for evacuating settlements. Almost 20 years ago, the Israeli government advocated that leaving Gaza was a path to peace.
2005 is for the settlers their Waterloo, their defeat.
That's when Israel removed all 8,000 settlers from Gaza. This is the Israeli settlement of Gush Katif. Back then, I profiled a 17-year-old who was being forced to leave her settlement in Gaza.
I can't imagine it. This is not possible.
Here we are 19 years later, and settlements are still front-page news.
Yes, that's how it is in Israel.
Rachel Yaheli Gross is now a mom with 3 kids and no longer lives in a settlement. The fact that you left your home, your settlement, as a teenager shows that settlements can be closed. Might that be a step toward peace?
After October 7th, I'm not so sure anymore. Because I really believed that that could be change, but I don't feel it anymore.
Hamas has really led to the growth of the Israeli right. If people in Israel thought that a Palestinian state was Costa Rica, they would line up to sign. Because they want to end the conflict, they just want to be safe. But if they feel a Palestinian state is a mini Iran, you can't find enough people in a phone booth.
Back in the West Bank, Rachel Breslavi and her family are just 5 of the 700,000 Israeli settlers who are working to change, as she puts it, the facts on the ground.
I wouldn't leave willingly because I'm raising my family here and I've built my dream home, and why does the peace agreement have to be at my expense to give up my home?